mouth breather. I'm very prone to conspiracy theories, and case in point, besides the coronavirus thing, which I still believe is intentionally orchestrated by sinister forces for the purpose of a globalist agenda, I also apply this theory on a supernatural level by suspecting that whatever gods or beings are responsible for the concept of fate, I feel like they have a sick sense of humor and will set people up for quasi-karmic downfalls, not because those people have done anything wrong enough to deserve punishment, but just kind of to knock them off balance. And this is the second video that I've recorded in a 2-week period since losing the ability to upload videos. Actually, I have been almost without internet for this entire 2-week period, and it broke when I tried to upload a video. So, the part of me that imagines conspiracies wants to believe that some sinister force tried to stop me from uploading a video by destroying my internet connection. But anyway, with all that insanity aside, the point in bringing this up is I don't want to talk too much about my D&D campaign because that's not really anybody's business. But I was reading through the notes about it, and I stumbled upon an interesting. I do a lot of writing for the game. There is no actual game being played at the moment, but I have run a number of sessions and short campaigns on the internet and a couple of real-life attempts. So it's something I've been working on for more than half a decade here, and I found a write-up that I think has an illustrative point about the real world, a concept in the real world that, like I said, I easily believe in conspiracies, and sometimes I think there is actually a conspiracy, but other times there's something which I think we need a different word for. And so I'm going to extract part of the write-up that I did here, because I don't want to talk about the game itself. That's not really anybody's business at the moment. But the idea that I was getting across to explain how a certain faction in the game operates, I'm gonna just read here. So it says, a loose analogy would be to consider the entire canon of Western cinema. While there is obviously nothing that is true in all movies, a huge number of films share tendencies, and many of the exceptions have intentionally positioned themselves specifically to oppose these genre conventions. The commonality of love stories is a particularly relevant example. While not every movie has love conquers all or some variant thereof as its message, a huge percentage of them do, and most of the movies that don't involve that moral are simply about something else so that this motif cannot emerge, or are intentionally subverting it. Likewise, the tendency in horror movies for a virginal woman to survive while a slutty one dies is reflective of a frequent repeated message, and subversions of this tendency are noteworthy in and of themselves. These two obvious examples are the vanguard of a legion of subtler trends across the Hollywood oeuvre. That is an excerpt from what would be... I often want to write up a manuscript describing this D&D campaign setting and have it eventually be published, probably self-published and not as an official D&D thing, but there's some sort of mechanism in place for that kind of thing. The best known variety is because the first several campaign settings for D&D emerged organically. the two men who are generally credited with inventing D&D are Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, and each one of them created a campaign world, respectively named Blackmoor and Greyhawk, and I think the two were eventually merged because of a business partnership between those two guys. But one of the first early adopters of D&D after those two was Ed Greenwood. His campaign setting became known as the Forgotten Realms. There were a couple other people whose names I forgot who created a setting called Dragonlance, and for much of the early history of D&D, it was basically those three worlds, and then they invented Spelljammer and Planescape as devices to move PCs from one of those campaign worlds to another, and it looks like Dark Sun was the fourth one invented, and Birthright, I think, came along at some point, and Ravenloft. But my point in mentioning all of those was to talk about not the most recent, but one of the most recent campaign settings to be invented for Dungeons & Dragons, which was called Eberron. And so the makers of D&D held a contest to come up with the next great campaign world after all the ones that I just mentioned. And so people were intentionally sitting down and describing their world, and Eberron was the contest winner. The guy who invented it, his name was Keith Baker, I think. So he intentionally designed a D&D world from the ground up, and he took exception to various standard cliches. For instance, the Drow or Dark Elves are a classic D&D race, and they're usually associated with spiders. He decided that in his world they were going to have scorpions instead. So, my point in bringing all this up is that if I were to publish the manuscript of my campaign setting the way that I sometimes hope for, the section about Hollywood tropes that I was just reading would be in the manuscript, along with some other stuff connecting all of that to the campaign world. So my point in bringing it up here is not to talk about my campaign world, even though I've been going on about D&D as much as about anything else. All of this is my usual awkward rambling preamble, where the point that I'm trying to get at is I'm constantly tempted to say, oh, this is a conspiracy. When I say that, even if there is not a conscious effort to have everybody work together towards a common goal, so if all of the, just to take example, if all of the electrical power companies in the world sat down and collectively agreed that they were all going to do things a certain way, that would be a monopoly, or possibly an oligopoly. I'm not clear on the exact difference. Other than that one of them is more legal than the other. If everybody is intentionally working together and collaborate openly or clandestinely collaborating to achieve a common goal, that's a conspiracy. If nobody is actually sitting down and talking about we're going to all do this, but they each independently come to the conclusion that they're going to do this, then we need a word for that. It's sort of this accidental conspiracy that hasn't been planned. So in Hollywood, every movie studio is competing against every other movie studios, and they're all trying to give the public what it wants. And they all have kind of a similar perception of what the public wants, and so their efforts at pandering to the lowest common denominator and playing into the most classic tropes that are going to get the most butts in seats. All of this is a deliberate effort where even though they've not all gotten together and planned where they're going. They all end up kind of going in the same direction by accident. So if you make a law saying that you can't have a monopoly, you can't have all of the electrical power companies in the world collectively decide that they're going to only install solid gold electrical wiring everywhere and charge extra for it. Obvious stupid example because I don't want to slander anybody. So that's pure hyperbole. If they all sat down and said we're all doing this so that we can all get away with it because they can't punish the whole industry all at once, that would be a conspiracy. But if they are each independently acting and all of them or almost all of them independently come to the same general decision, that may not be a conspiracy, but it's still something, and it's still a problem, and all of the ranting that gets done around a conspiracy theory is still valid even when there isn't an actual conspiracy if it's that kind of thing. So, I often rant about my employment woes. Obviously, my every company that I apply to is not cooperating with every other company to deny me a job, but the fact that they all kind of have the same general sorts of standards of what they want in an employee makes my job of winning them over really difficult, because the things that they've all kind of independently decided they're going to screen for are exactly the kind of things that I tend to broadcast. So it makes it really hard for me to win my way through the interview process when everybody kind of takes one look at me and goes, oh my god, this guy's a psycho, this is a lawsuit waiting to happen, we can't hire this guy. I think it's ridiculous that they all kind of jump to that conclusion, and I think it's very much a function of the fact that most of them have all been to business schools. Once again, the various universities in the world are not intentionally cooperating with each other, but because they're all being shaped by the same trends and they're all kind of pursuing similar goals along similar methods, they get similar results. So even when there's not an actual conspiracy, a lot of the time you end up, there's probably a formal term for this kind of thing, and if I had gone to college maybe I would know it, but this is an issue that society has, and the fact that I'm sitting here ranting about conspiracies and someone will say, oh, we can prove that there isn't a conspiracy, when they can't prove that it isn't this kind of thing that I'm talking about now. There's a lot of people out there whose approach to argumentation on the internet or elsewhere is, if you can name one logical fallacy that the person has committed in their argument, then that means their entire argument is wrong because they used one logical fallacy one time, and it gives people a very easy excuse to just shut people down and not listen to them. So if I am saying there's a conspiracy and you're able to prove that that there isn't actually a conspiracy, that doesn't mean that what I was saying is wrong. That just means I got one detail inaccurate. The overall thrust of what I was saying could easily still be true. So don't be so quick to close your ears just because somebody says one thing wrong. They might still have the effective gist of what they're talking about.